Well, hi everybody, welcome to the Firewall. I'm Bill Whittle. I have a fairly broad tapestry to try and weave today, so please give me a little time to pull together several divergent threads. Now, a long time ago in a land far, far away, the time was the early 1920s and the place was Germany, a group of influential Marxist thinkers took a look at the wreckage of the world in the immediate aftermath of the Great War, World War I, and they asked themselves, what happened? Marxism, you see, had confidently predicted that out of capitalism, out of the Industrial Revolution, the working man proletariat would arise and overthrow the capitalist bourgeoisie, but it didn't happen. And the communist revolution was supposed to occur in the developed industrial nations, Germany, France, Britain, America, places like that, and not in the one place where it did actually occur, backward, feudal, agricultural Russia. And so these Marxist philosophers started what we would today call a think tank. They named it the Institute of Marxism, which I think is a little on the nose, and they set up shop in Frankfurt University. The big brains at what became known as the Frankfurt School deduced that those evil, rotten, capitalist bastards were not being hanged by mobs of workers because they had provided so much wealth, so much relative prosperity, that the common working man was living far, far better than he ever had before. And so they decided that if their Marxist Eden could not be brought to earth through class warfare and economic struggle, then they wouldn't make it a war about economics. They just lost that war. They would make it a war on culture. Now, 50 years ago, Hollywood made movies about heroes and good triumphed over evil. There were villains, of course, but a good, if flawed, man would come along and set things right again. The good and the right were the natural state of America in Hollywood half a century ago. Those days are long gone. The left has slowly and methodically transferred Hollywood into a negative image of what it once was. Now it's a criminal, or a whistleblower, or a union organizer, or a renegade lawyer, or the last honest man in a corrupt military, pointing out how evil and corrupt America is and always has been. And the result is a myth machine that is at war with and has nothing but contempt for its own people. And this is where our little gear meshes with the much larger ones that drive the rise and fall of civilizations. For every civilization falls the same way, from the top down. Bored, guilt-ridden, self-loathing elitists always fiddle while their city burns. Now, there's a term for this psychological illness, and that's what it is. It's called oikophobia. It's the opposite of xenophobia, which is the fear and loathing of the strange, of the other. Oikophobia is hatred and disgust of the familiar, of one's own culture and people. When you get right down to it, it's hatred of one's own self and the pathological desire of the oikophobe to divorce himself from his own roots and culture. And if you come from a prosperous and free society and your guilt is at great wealth that may have been unearned, or you're bitter and desire to appear smarter and on a higher intellectual and moral plane than the happy and successful people that surround you, well then your hatred and loathing of your own culture can set up some supernova levels of hypocrisy. Let's hunt for a few examples, shall we? Michael Moore lectures us on the evils of capitalism and then sues his former friends for millions of dollars of additional royalties. Al Gore tells us that capitalist societies, consumerism, and jet travel are literally frying the planet and dooming us all to drown, and yet he burns more electricity in his mansion than 30 normal American households and travels the world constantly by private jet. Prince can make a career out of pushing the boundaries of lewdness and public obscenity and write songs with the most graphic sexual content imaginable, and then lecture the rubes on how it's fun to live under Islam with its one religion, lots of order, and women dressed in tents. Bill Maher can call Americans the stupidest people in the world and have thousands of people, thousands of Americans, cheering him on for saying so. Why? Well, because he doesn't mean himself, of course, or his self-selecting oikophobe audience. He means those other morons down in the South or out in flyover country. And speaking of Bill Maher, New York Times columnist and opinion shaper David Carr can call anything between New York and LA home to the dance of the sloping foreheads, before returning to his home in New Jersey, which is paid for by the sale of his memoirs chronicling a self-loathing life of cocaine and crack addiction. And we could do this all day. So let's bring these threads together, because here's what's happening. Historically, when societies become affluent and secure, it is, paradoxically enough, the most affluent and secure that develop this oikophobic guilt and self-hatred. This has happened all throughout human history. Babylon fell this way. Now, in our present cycle, critical theory, political correctness, and all the other tools of the Frankfurt School appeal to these elite, powerful oikophobes who then use their power as communicators and opinion shapers to undermine the greater morality and mythology. For example, Right now, in this country, we're standing on vast reserves of oil and gas and coal that we are not allowed to drill for while energy prices go through the roof. Why? Well, you may say it's because of laws and regulations preventing us from doing so. That's right, but that's not the answer. You may say that it's because of the politicians that write the laws and that we need to lobby and replace them. That's also right, and that's also not the answer. Those politicians are elected by their constituents. It's the electorate that's changed, not the laws or the politicians. People who neither know nor care about energy policy or alternatives continue to vote for these politicians, not because of what they know about the trade-offs of oil, coal, and nuclear, but rather because they've been taught for 40 years now that oil men are evil, greedy, heartless villains, that coal gives you black lung disease and roasts the planet with CO2, and that nuclear plants just melt down at whim and kill millions of people. None of it's true, and they all believe it. Why? Because Hollywood taught them to believe it. Now, we need a good metaphor here, and I've got just the thing. Let's say that there is an evil land called Mordor, and let's say that a cloud of poisonous smoke and ash emanates from the center of Mordor at Mount Doom and spreads not only through Mordor, but across the good and decent land of Gondor, poisoning its air as well. And let's say that Mordor is ringed by jagged mountains, and the only way in is a big black gate that lets in only those philosophically aligned with Mordor and willing to breathe that poisonous air. And let's say that a small army stands outside the gate ready to make a desperate last stand against the legions of Mordor that vastly outnumber them. But this isn't the Lord of the Rings. It's the 21st century war for America's culture. Hollywood, once a fair and green land, is now Mordor, filled with self-loathing oikophobes who naturally enough gravitate to the Frankfurt School ideology of critical theory and political correctness as a way to assuage their own guilt and desire for unearned moral and intellectual superiority. The cloud of gas from Mount Doom is the perpetual, widespread, anti-capitalist, collectivist, toxic narrative that modern Hollywood continues to spew. That cloud is poisoning the green and decent and morally sound land of Gondor, which we'll call flyover country, home to us low-sloping forehead types. The walls keep out any goodness or slightest injection of morality, patriotism, and self-pride. And if you don't believe that wall really exists, then go read my friend Ben Shapiro's book, Primetime Propaganda, the true Hollywood story of how the left took over your TV, where the lords of modern-day Mordor not only admit to not hiring and firing, in fact, American patriots and conservatives, they actually brag about it. The small army at the gates is the Tea Party, trying to hold the political line against ever-increasing numbers of people born under this cloud, polluted by it, turned into debased and self-loathing monsters by it. That little political stand has no long-term chance to win against such reckless hate. It's a holding action. It's just a diversion. We must go to Mount Doom and destroy that power at its source. 1 year ago, on the 4th of July, 2010, Declaration Entertainment opened its doors and asked for your help so that we could simply walk into Mordor and destroy that power.
One does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep.
Well, with all due respect, Boromir, yes, you do. You simply do walk into the heart of enemy territory and destroy it, not by silencing their story. We don't want to do that. We do it by telling better stories. We don't want a new Hollywood. We want the old Hollywood back. For all of the might of Mordor, for all of the smoke and ashen legions and armaments, this so-called progressive, self-hating left got 53% of the vote in 2008 with every political advantage known to man. That's it. We don't have to trudge for 200 leagues. We only have to struggle for a few yards. Those of you who became citizen producers in the last year have trusted us with your money and your hopes. And so right now, at this very second, Jeremy Boring is in Texas, where he will shoot our first feature film called The Arroyo. It's high noon with pickup trucks and cell phones. I'm going to edit that film in July and August. Those citizen producers gave us the time and the tools we needed to take this fight to the enemy in this war for the heart of American culture. Now, we're not the only people in this fight, obviously. In fact, we're nothing like the biggest players in this battle, but we are walking into Mordor. And we either will succeed or, well, we'll never work under that volcano again. And when we're done with The Arroyo, we'll begin on my film, Aurora, about a privately funded mission to Jupiter using nuclear energy, where engineers and oil men are the good guys and the regulators, anarchists, and eco-protesters are the bad guys. It's science fiction. we could use your support. For a limited time, Declaration Entertainment is set up to take a one-time only donation specifically toward the Arroyo for those of you that don't want monthly membership. And for those of you who got us here, thank you. The real work is only now beginning, and we hope we won't let you down. I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time on The Firewall.